next challenge, we will be making a simple calculator. You are required to create a simple calculator that returns the result of addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division of two numbers. So your function will take 3 arguments. The first and second arguments should be numbers. The third argument should represent a sign indicating the operation to perform on these two numbers. If the sign is not a valid sign, throw an argument exception. Check out the examples below. 1 plus 2 is 3, pretty straightforward. But notice if you get an unsupported, not one of the 4 operators that were specified above, like the $sign, we're going to throw something called an argument exception. We've talked a little bit about throwing exceptions, and we'll get a chance to do that here. So let's get on to it. For this one, another new concept, at least in this series, that I can show is the use of the switch statement, which is kind of like, it's much like in if-else, a series of if-else statements. So let's get right into that. So instead of if and a condition, you're going to use this keyword switch. And I'm going to switch on the operator. I'm just going to come in as a character. I'll use these braces to define my scope. And then you use this case keyword and mention what specifically, which character in this case that this case represents. I'll start with addition. So put whatever value and then a colon. Underneath that, you can list multiple lines specifying what to do in the case of the addition operator. In our case, this is pretty simple. We can simply return a plus b for addition. Good. And then we are going to repeat this idea for multiple cases. I'm returning here, but oftentimes you won't return in the case statement. And just so you know, when we get multiple cases here, say we have some more in, you can use a break statement to jump. So what happens is, I'll do whatever I have to do some work, and then at the end you would say break. If you don't specify this break, you can fall through to the other cases and their code will run too. Sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you combine cases. If won't make sense here, but you could, if you were going to take the same response on 2 different values, you can just list a whole bunch of them, as many as you want here, and then specify the work to do in one section. So that can be handy. But we're just going to return here. But that can be confusing at first if you know you're running through all the case statement logic for all the cases, trying to figure out why. That's probably what happened. So subtraction should be simple as well, a minus b, right? Then what do we have? Case multiplication. I assume it's the character they're going to use for that. They really should have listed the characters that they were expecting, but we'll assume that we'll get an error if that's wrong. Return a times b, no problem. Division gets a little weird though, right? There's a specific case we have to watch out for. I'll assume this / for the division operator. And in this case, we have to make sure that the denominator is not 0, right? You can't divide by 0. That's an undefined operation. So let's check that real quick. This will be a little tricky because of that we're using double values. So they may not, it's hard to check for equality with a double oftentimes. I think this came up in one of our other challenges. You kind of have a little, an epsilon, a little bit of leeway around the value you're trying to match with to account for double precision values not being, you know, they could be off by a very tiny amount, but maybe you still want to catch that. So that's often how that happens. I'm not going to worry about that here. I'm just going to simply say if b equals 0. who knows, they may not even test that case. They should, but I don't see it in here. You should, that's a good case to test. But anyway, I'm going to throw a different kind of exception here. Let's call it throw new. I looked this one up. I think it's divide by 0 exception. We'll get yelled at if I did that wrong. But provided that b is not 0, we can do like the other cases and simply return a divided by b. And then finally, note that with switch statements, you list all your cases out and what to do for them. And then you can end it with this default. At least I always put default at the end. I assume it belongs there. I don't know what happened if you moved default up higher, but anyway, for the default, this happens when our op doesn't match any of these cases, right? It didn't match plus, minus, multiply, or divide. So it's something else like $sign or some other character. That's garbage. And they told us throw specifically an argument exception. And these all come from a base exception class. You know, there's all these different flavors of exceptions that derive from exception. And they told us to specifically throw that one. Throw new, argument exception. And this is kind of like just signaling an error in the program. And with exceptions, you can have an opportunity to handle them, possibly recover from the error, or to sort of fail gracefully and terminate execution, maybe write some logs that will help you diagnose the problem, whatever. But that's sort of how that works. These exceptions can kind of get passed along to an appropriate part of the program to handle them. I'm sure we'll get more into exceptions as the series goes on. Anyway, covering what they said to do for the default case. Default with a switch statement is a catch-all. So I think we're pretty much good here. That is the switch statement. We had to cover the 4 main mathematical operators. I think we did that. Let's run the test. Let's see what we get. Error, divide by 0. Okay, so I must have named that. Oh, I think I know what I did. We got to bring in the system namespace. That is not something that we coded, so let's bring in the system namespace. See if that covers us. Okay, that's better. Now we have our exceptions. And yeah, pretty straightforward there. Hopefully you bang this one out. You could just as well have said if op equals the character plus, you know, do a plus b. Then you could say else if op equals minus, subtract the numbers. That's fine. It works out the same way. Took this opportunity to show the switch statement because I haven't used it yet. Yeah, a little more information about exceptions. We'll get more into that too. But yeah, pretty straightforward. So our initial test looks good. Let's go ahead and hit that larger test suite. See what we come up with. Everything still looks good. So we are clear to submit. We'll go ahead and do that. I'm sure we'll see some variation in other answers. Let's go ahead and check out what other people did. Okay. So yeah, a lot of people using the switch statement. I like the white space between the variable names and the operators. To me, this looks too pinched and it's not nice on my eyes, but some people like to do it like that. You can notice that they took a different way, right? They didn't use the using system namespace, so they typed out the fully qualified name here. You know, you can say instead of including the library, you can access it by just saying system argument exception. You know, think of how we've accessed members of classes. You know, we use the class name, the dot, and then what we want. We did that here. You'll note that you can offer text, and I recommend that in a real life scenario. Good stuff. Probably don't want to do cutesy stuff like laughing at people. That usually won't fly in a professional environment, but we're just coding in the dojo here. I suppose that'll work. What else we got? So yeah, there's the alternative one way. You can use if, else if. I will say that I wouldn't recommend using else if statements if you just return in your if statement. You know, if you hit here, you return in your out. There's no else if. You could have just omitted the else and made another if statement saying if op is minus return if. So it could have just been 4 separate if statements there. And then finally throw the exception if you make it all the way to the bottom. But that, you know, that passes too. Dictionary. Okay, yeah, these guys are getting a little fancier. Built up a dictionary. Nice. And then they can, you see the dictionaries have this contains key that you can look at. Very handy. Double multiplication. So they actually made out methods for each type. So yeah, feel free to explore that all you like. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.